You ever walk into a room so expensive, it forgets how to be human? The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, folded in thick ivory paper that didn't belong in Marcus Reed's world. His name was printed in sharp black ink, clean and certain, as if whoever wrote it had never doubted where he stood. He turned it over once in his hands, grease faintly lining the creases of his fingers from a morning shift that started before sunrise. The return address read Hale Foundation, downtown Manhattan, a place he had only seen from the outside, glass catching the light like it had something to prove. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't frown either. He just stood there in his small kitchen, coffee cooling beside him, listening to the quiet hum of a refrigerator that worked harder than it should. His son's backpack rested against the chair, one strap torn but carefully stitched back together, a reminder of things that didn't get replaced, only held together. He read the card again. Invitation to annual gala. Formal attire required. Guest of Victoria Hale. That last line stayed with him longer than the rest. Not because of what it meant, but because of what it didn't explain. Marcus wasn't the kind of man who got invited into rooms like that. Not by accident. Not by someone like her. He set the card down, then picked it back up, as if the weight of it might change if he waited long enough. It didn't. Across the city, Victoria Hale stood in a room 3 stories above the street. Her reflection split across a wall of glass and steel. Her assistant spoke in numbers, timelines, seating charts, the language of precision that built her world. Victoria listened, but not fully. Her eyes lingered on a tablet screen, on a name highlighted in blue. Marcus Reed. She tilted her head slightly, not smiling, not quite thinking. Add him to table 12, she said, her voice even, controlled, as if the decision carried no weight at all. The assistant hesitated for half a second, just enough to notice, then nodded. Of course. Victoria turned away before the moment could grow into something else. Outside, the city moved like it always did, loud and certain and unaware. Inside, everything was measured. Even silence. Back in his apartment, Marcus checked the time. 5:42 p.m. His son would be home. In less than 10 minutes. He placed the invitation on the table, next to a stack of bills he had already sorted twice, as if organization could make numbers smaller. When the door opened, it came with the sound of sneakers dragging and a voice too young to carry worry. Dad. Marcus turned, his expression softening in a way no one at that gala would ever see. Hey, champ. The boy dropped his bag, walked straight to the fridge, then paused, noticing the envelope. What's that? Marcus followed his gaze. Just something I might have to go to. The boy raised an eyebrow, curious in the simple way only children are. You gonna wear that old suit? Marcus glanced toward the closet, already knowing the answer. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I will. He didn't say anything else. Not about the room he hadn't seen yet. Not about the people who might look at him and decide who he was before he spoke. Not about why someone like Victoria Hale would write his name like it belonged next to hers. He just reached for his coffee, took a slow sip, and let the silence sit where it needed to. Some invitations don't come with answers. And some rooms don't expect you to bring your own. Marcus did not decide right away. The invitation stayed where he left it, on the kitchen table, quiet but present, like something waiting to be noticed again. The evening moved the way his evenings always did, steady and practical. Homework spread across the table. A math worksheet with eraser marks pressed too hard into the paper. His son leaned over it, tongue slightly out, thinking harder than the problem deserved. Marcus sat across from him, one elbow resting on the table, eyes soft but focused. Take your time, he said, not looking at the paper but at the boy. The answer came a minute later, unsure but honest. Marcus nodded once. That works. He did not correct it right away. Not everything needed fixing in the moment. Later, after dishes were rinsed and stacked and the apartment settled into that familiar quiet, Marcus stood in front of the closet. The suit hung on the far left, covered in a thin layer of plastic that had been reused more times than it should have been. He pulled it out carefully, like it might remember the last time it was worn. The fabric was still clean. Not new, but cared for. He ran his hand along the sleeve, smoothing nothing in particular. In another part of the city, the gala space was already taking shape. Lights tested. Tables aligned down to the inch. Every glass placed with intention. Victoria walked through it all without slowing down. Heels measured, precise. Her presence adjusted the air more than her voice ever did. People moved differently when she entered a room, even before she spoke. She stopped near the center, eyes scanning the layout. "Table 12, she said quietly. Her assistant stepped forward. "Yes." Victoria did not elaborate. She did not need to. But her gaze lingered there for a fraction longer than the others, as if something about that spot carried a weight she had not named yet. Back in the apartment, Marcus checked the mirror. Not to admire, just to confirm. The tie took him 2 tries. The knot sat slightly off-center. Then he adjusted it without frustration. His son stood in the doorway, watching with quiet interest. "You look like the guys on TV," the boy said. Marcus let out a small breath that almost became a laugh. "I do not think those guys wear shoes this old." The boy stepped closer, looking down. "They look fine." Marcus nodded. That was enough. He reached for his coat, paused, then turned back. "I will not be too late," he said. The boy shrugged in that way children do when they trust something without needing proof. "Okay." Outside, the air carried that early evening chill, just enough to make people walk a little faster. Marcus locked the door, checked it once, then again. Habit, not fear. The subway ride was longer than usual, or maybe it just felt that way. Reflections moved across the window, faces blending in and out without staying long enough to matter. Marcus stood near the door, one hand steady on the pole, the other resting by his side. He did not rehearse anything. He did not imagine what he would say or who he would meet. He just rode. When the train reached his stop, he stepped out into a part of the city that did not recognize him and did not try to. The building rose ahead of him, tall in a way that did not need to announce itself. Glass. Light. Quiet confidence. Marcus slowed for half a second, just enough to take it in, then kept walking. Inside, everything felt polished. Not just the floors. The people. The air. Conversations floated instead of landing. Laughter stayed controlled, measured, like it had a place to return to. No one stopped him. No one welcomed him either. He handed over his name at the front, voice calm, clear. The attendant checked the list, then nodded. "Right this way." Marcus followed, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving forward. Some rooms do not ask who you are. They decide it for you the moment you walk in. Marcus followed the attendant through a corridor lined with soft light that did not glare but revealed everything it touched. The carpet muted his steps, thick enough to make sound feel unnecessary. Voices drifted from the main hall ahead, low and controlled, like people who knew exactly how loud they were allowed to be. When he entered, the room opened wide, ceiling high, glass walls reflecting a city that looked smaller from above. Chandeliers hung like quiet statements, not demanding attention, but holding it anyway. Marcus did not stop walking. He did not look up too long. He let his eyes adjust the way they always had, slowly, carefully, taking in the details without announcing that he was doing it. A server passed by with a tray balanced perfectly, movements practiced and invisible at the same time. Marcus stepped slightly to the side to give space, a small shift that went unnoticed by most, but not by everyone. At table 12, a place card waited. His name again. Clean. Certain. He pulled the chair back, just enough, sat without noise, hands resting lightly on the table as if he had been there before. Around him, conversations continued, but none of them reached him. Not directly. They moved around him instead. A man to his left adjusted his cufflinks without looking over. A woman across the table smiled at someone else, her attention never drifting. It was not hostility. It was absence. Marcus did not interrupt it. He did not try to fill it. He simply sat, present in a space that had not planned for him. Across the room, Victoria stood near the center, speaking with someone whose name carried weight in rooms like this. She listened more than she spoke, her posture steady, her expression composed in a way that made people reveal more than they intended. But her attention shifted, just slightly. Not her body, just her eyes. They moved across the room, passing over faces she already knew, landing for a brief second on one she did not. Marcus did not notice. He was watching something else. A server, younger than the others, almost missed a step as a glass tilted near the edge of a tray. It did not fall, but it came close enough to leave a trace of tension in the air. Marcus reached out without standing, steadying the edge of the tray with 2 fingers, just enough to stop the movement. No words. No attention drawn. The server blinked once, then nodded quietly. "Thank you," she said under her breath. Marcus gave a small nod in return, already letting the moment go. No one at the table reacted. They had not seen it, or they had not needed to. Victoria had. From across the room, her gaze paused, not on the action itself, but on what followed. The absence of reaction. The way Marcus returned his hand to the table as if nothing had happened. The way he did not look around to see who noticed. She tilted her head slightly, something unreadable passing through her expression. Not curiosity. Not yet. Something quieter. The room continued. Glasses clinked softly. A laugh rose, then settled. Music played somewhere in the background, just loud enough to remind people they were not alone. Marcus sat still, shoulders relaxed, eyes moving occasionally, but never searching for approval. He was not trying to belong. He was not trying to leave. He was simply there. And for the first time that evening, that seemed to matter more than anyone expected. The evening moved forward without announcing it, like a clock no one needed to check. Plates were replaced before they were empty. Glasses refilled before anyone asked. Conversations layered over each other in careful tones, never too loud, never too honest. Marcus remained where he was, his posture unchanged, his presence steady in a room that measured everything. He listened without leaning in, observed without staring. Across the table, a man finally acknowledged him, not with interest, but with a glance that paused just long enough to categorize. "You are with which firm?" the man asked, voice smooth, already expecting an answer that would place Marcus somewhere familiar. Marcus looked at him, calm, unhurried. "I am not with a firm," he said. The man nodded, but it was the kind of nod that closed a door rather than opened one. "I see." He did not ask anything else. The conversation shifted away, leaving Marcus exactly where he had been before. Unmoved. Not offended. Just present. On the far side of the room, a small ripple of attention began to gather. Not loud. Not obvious. Just enough to signal that something was about to happen. A host stepped toward the center, microphone in hand, posture confident, voice trained to carry without effort. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, and the room responded the way it always did, conversations softening, bodies turning slightly, attention aligning without being asked twice. Victoria stood just behind the arc of light, her expression composed, her hands loosely folded in front of her. She did not need the microphone. The room already belonged to her. "Tonight is about impact," the host continued, words polished, expected. "About recognizing those who contribute in ways that often go unseen." A few heads nodded. A few smiles formed. The kind that understood the script. Marcus listened, not to the words, but to the space between them. He had heard this tone before. Different rooms. Same rhythm. Recognition that rarely reached the people it described. The host paused, then glanced toward Victoria. A small gesture. Permission without asking. She inclined her head once. Subtle. Enough. And sometimes, the host added, with a hint of something lighter, we invite someone who reminds us just how wide that gap can be. A ripple of soft laughter moved through the room. Not sharp. Not cruel. But not kind either. The host turned slightly, scanning the tables, then landing on one. "Table 12. Marcus Reed," he said, reading the name with careful clarity. "Would you join us for a moment?" A few heads turned. Not all. Just enough. Marcus did not react immediately. He looked toward the center, then back at the table, then rose without hesitation. No rush. No reluctance. He adjusted his jacket once, a small movement, then began walking. The distance was not far, but it felt measured in something other than steps. Eyes followed him now. Some curious. Some indifferent. Some already decided. Marcus did not meet them. He kept his gaze forward, not fixed, just steady. When he reached the center, the host offered the microphone with a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. Marcus took it with a simple nod. "Thank you," he said quietly. The host stepped aside. The light shifted, centering him without asking if he wanted it. For a moment, nothing happened. Marcus stood there, the microphone resting in his hand, the room waiting in a way that was not patient, but expectant. Not for what he would say, but for what he would reveal about himself. Victoria watched from just beyond the light, her eyes fixed, her expression unchanged, but something behind it had already started to move. Not doubt. Not yet. Just attention. And in a room built on control, that was the first thing to slip. Marcus did not lift the microphone right away. He let the weight of it settle in his hand, as if it belonged there before he decided what to do with it. The room waited. Not silently, but expectantly. A few people shifted in their seats. A glass touched the table a little louder than before. Somewhere near the back, a quiet laugh tried to disguise itself as a cough. Marcus looked out, not searching for a face, not avoiding one either. Just looking. "I almost did not come tonight," he said, his voice even, steady, not raised to command the room, but clear enough to reach it. The words landed without decoration. Simple. A few eyebrows lifted. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. There was no performance in it. No attempt to impress. Just truth, placed gently where everyone could see it. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, one foot settling more firmly beneath him. "Not because of the place," he continued, glancing briefly around the room, acknowledging the space without admiring it. "And not because of the people." A pause. Not long. Just enough to let the sentence breathe. "But because I was not sure if I belonged here." The air changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. A few smiles faded. Not completely. Just less certain. Marcus did not rush to fill the silence. He let it stay. Let it do its work. "I have been in rooms like this before," he said. "Not this one. But rooms where everything looks right. Sounds right. Feels almost right." His eyes moved across the tables now, slower, not focusing on anyone, but including everyone. And sometimes, in those rooms, there are people you do not see. Not because they are hidden, but because no one is looking. A fork paused halfway to a plate. A conversation that had been whispering in the corner stopped without being told to. Marcus lowered his gaze for a moment, then lifted it again, not with intensity, but with quiet certainty. "I am a father," he said. "That is the most important thing about me." No explanation followed. None needed. "And every day, I try to teach my son something simple." He adjusted his grip on the microphone, not tightening it, just making it his. "I tell him that the way you treat people who cannot do anything for you, that is who you really are." No one laughed now. No one shifted. The room held still in a way it had not all night. Marcus turned slightly, just enough for his eyes to pass over the staff moving along the edges of the room. "The people who refill your glass," he said. "The ones who clear your table before you even notice it is messy." A server slowed, just for a second, as if unsure whether to keep moving or to listen. Marcus did not point. He did not call anyone out. He just let the words reach where they needed to. "They are not part of the background," he added quietly. "They are part of the room." The sentence settled deeper than the others. Not louder, just heavier. Victoria's posture did not change, but something behind her eyes did. Not discomfort. Not yet. Recognition. Marcus looked back toward the center, his expression unchanged, his voice still calm. "Tonight, I was invited here," he said. "And I am grateful for that." Another pause. Softer this time. "But I did not come to be seen." He let the words rest there, unfinished in a way that made people lean in without realizing it. Then he added, just as quietly, "I came because sometimes the right thing to do is show up anyway." And for a moment, the room did not know what to do with that. Marcus let the last sentence settle without trying to carry it any further. He did not add emphasis. He did not repeat himself. He simply stood there, the microphone still in his hand, as if the moment did not belong to him alone. The silence that followed was different now. Not empty, not uncomfortable, just unpracticed. People in the room were used to knowing when to respond, when to clap, when to smile. This time, no one moved first. A man near the front shifted in his seat, then stopped, as if unsure whether the moment had ended. A woman lifted her glass, then lowered it again without taking a sip. The room, for the first time that evening, had no script. Marcus looked out once more, not to check reactions, but to acknowledge presence. "There is a difference," he said quietly, his voice softer now, but somehow reaching further, between being invited into a room and being welcomed in it. A few heads lowered. Not dramatically, just slightly, enough to feel it. "And I think," he continued, "a lot of people spend their lives trying to earn a place where they were never meant to prove anything in the first place." He did not look at Victoria when he said it. He did not need to. The words found their way without direction. Across the room, her posture remained composed, but her hands had shifted, fingers now loosely interlaced instead of resting apart. It was a small change. Easy to miss. But it was there. Marcus exhaled slowly, almost as if he were letting something go rather than holding anything back. I do not have a company to represent, he said. I do not have a title that opens doors. A faint movement passed through the crowd. Not disagreement, just recognition. But I have a son who is watching how I move through the world, he added. And that matters more to me than any seat at any table. The sentence landed with a weight that did not need volume. Somewhere near the back, the same young server from earlier stood still for a moment longer than she should have, tray balanced in her hands, eyes fixed not on Marcus, but on the space around him, as if something had shifted that she could not quite name. Marcus lowered the microphone slightly, not ending, but easing. So tonight, he said, if I leave with anything, it will not be the food, or the room, or the names I heard. A faint trace of something softer touched his expression. Not a smile, just warmth. It will be the reminder that every room, no matter how polished, is still made of people. No one laughed. No one interrupted. The room held the sentence the way it had held the silence before it. Carefully, almost cautiously, Marcus glanced down for a brief second, then back up. And people, he finished, have a choice. He did not explain the choice. He did not define it. He left it where it was, open, unfinished in a way that made it heavier. Then, without any signal, without waiting for permission, he gave a small nod. Not to the audience. Not to anyone specific. Just a quiet acknowledgement that he had said what he came to say. He handed the microphone back to the host, who took it a second too late, as if he had forgotten his role for a moment. Marcus stepped away from the light, his movements the same as when he walked in. Steady, unhurried, not looking for a reaction. Behind him, the room remained still, caught between what it expected to feel and what it actually did. And in that space, something real had finally entered. Marcus returned to his seat the same way he had left it, without drawing attention, without expecting anything to follow. He adjusted his chair slightly, sat down, and rested his hands on the table as if the last few minutes had been no different than any other part of the evening. But the room did not move the same way anymore. Conversations did not resume immediately. They restarted slowly, unevenly, like people learning how to speak again without a script. A man near the center cleared his throat, then said something about the next item on the program, but his voice lacked the certainty it had carried before. The host stepped forward again, microphone in hand, offering a practiced smile that felt just a fraction too late. Thank you, Marcus, he said, pausing just long enough to suggest he had almost forgotten the name. A few scattered claps followed. Not loud, not unified, but real. They came from different parts of the room, not coordinated, not expected, but honest in a way the evening had not been until now. Marcus did not look up. He did not acknowledge them. Not out of pride, just because he did not need to. Across the room, Victoria remained where she stood, but she was no longer observing the room. She was watching him, not the man who had just spoken, but the one who had returned to his seat without claiming anything from it. Her gaze lingered longer than before, not searching for meaning, but recognizing it. Around her, conversations resumed, but she did not rejoin them. Someone spoke to her, a question about a partnership, a detail about a number, something that would have mattered an hour ago. She nodded once, gave a brief answer, but her attention had already shifted elsewhere. At table 12, the man who had earlier asked Marcus about his firm leaned slightly in his direction, hesitation replacing the quiet dismissal from before. That was, well said. He offered, his tone careful, as if unsure how much weight the words should carry. Marcus turned his head just enough to acknowledge him. Thank you, he said simply. No extension, no invitation to continue. The man nodded, then leaned back, the conversation ending before it began. Not out of rejection, just completion. The young server moved through the room again, but her steps were slower now, not from uncertainty, but from awareness. She placed a glass near Marcus with the same quiet precision as before, but this time, she paused just long enough for their eyes to meet. Have a good evening, sir, she said softly. Marcus gave a small nod. You too. The exchange lasted less than a second, but it carried more presence than most of the conversations that followed. On the far side of the room, Victoria finally moved. Not quickly, not with intention anyone could name. She stepped away from the cluster of people surrounding her, her heels marking a steady rhythm across the polished floor. Each step measured, but not calculated. She did not look at anyone else as she walked. The room noticed, but did not interrupt. They were used to her movement. They were not used to its direction. Marcus did not see her approach at first. He was looking down at the table, not in thought, just resting in the quiet that had followed him back to his seat. It was not until the subtle shift in the air changed again that he looked up. Victoria stopped beside the table, close enough to speak, far enough to leave space. For a moment, she said nothing. And in a room that had been built on words, that silence carried more weight than anything she could have planned. Victoria did not speak immediately. She stood beside the table, her presence shifting the space around it without needing to announce itself. The conversations nearby softened again, not because anyone asked them to, but because something quieter had taken their place. Marcus looked up at her, not startled, not impressed, just aware. For a moment, they held each other's gaze without urgency, without performance. Two people standing in a room that had finally slowed down enough to notice them. "Mr. Reed," she said at last, her voice lower than it had been all evening, not meant for the room, only for him. Marcus gave a small nod. "Ma'am." The word was simple, respectful, not distant, not familiar, just right where it needed to be. Victoria's eyes studied him for a second longer, not in judgment, not in curiosity, but in something closer to recognition. "You spoke clearly," she said. It was not a compliment. Not exactly. More like an observation she had not expected to make. Marcus glanced down briefly, then back at her. "I tried to," he replied. No added weight. No attempt to extend the moment. Victoria shifted her posture slightly, one hand resting lightly against the back of the empty chair beside him. "That room," she said, her eyes moving for a brief second toward the center where he had stood, "does not usually go quiet." Marcus followed her glance, then returned his attention to her. "Maybe it needed to," he said. The answer came without hesitation, but without force. Victoria exhaled softly, a breath so subtle it would have gone unnoticed anywhere else. "I have hosted this event for 6 years," she said. "Every detail planned. Every word prepared." She paused, not for effect, but because something in the thought slowed her down. "And tonight, none of it felt as real as what you said in a few minutes." Marcus did not respond right away. He let the words sit, not absorbing them, not rejecting them, just letting them be what they were. Around them, people pretended not to watch. Glasses lifted. Conversations resumed in fragments. But attention lingered, just beneath the surface. "I did not come here to change anything," Marcus said finally. His voice remained even, the same tone he had carried all night. "I just said what I believe." Victoria nodded. Once, slowly. "That is exactly why it did." The sentence was quiet, but it held. She looked at him again, more directly this time, without the distance she had maintained before. "When I invited you," she added, her voice lowering slightly, "I thought I understood what this evening needed." A brief pause. Not long. Just enough to acknowledge something unspoken. "I was wrong." Marcus did not ask what she meant. He did not need to. The way she said it carried enough. He leaned back slightly in his chair, not withdrawing, just settling. "That happens," he said. "No judgment. No edge. Just truth." Victoria let out a faint breath that almost became a quiet laugh, but stopped before it fully formed. Not because she could not laugh, but because the moment did not ask for it. "You are not what I expected," she said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Most people are not," he replied. The answer was gentle, but it landed deeper than it sounded. Victoria's gaze softened, just enough to show that something had shifted beyond control, beyond planning. For the first time that evening, she was not managing the room. She was part of it. "Would you stay a little longer?" she asked. The question was simple. No condition. No transaction behind it. Just a request. Marcus looked at her for a moment, not measuring the words, but feeling the space they came from. Then he nodded once. "For a little while," he said. And in a room that had spent the entire night trying to be perfect, that quiet agreement felt like the first honest thing it had held. The room did not return to what it had been. It could not. Something small had shifted, but it was enough to change how everything else settled. Conversations resumed, but they carried a different weight now, softer at the edges, less certain of themselves. People spoke, but they listened a little more than before. Not everyone, but enough to matter. Marcus remained at the table, his posture unchanged, his presence still quiet, still grounded in a way that did not compete with the room, but slowly redefined it. Victoria stayed beside him a moment longer, not out of obligation, but because leaving too quickly would have felt like returning to something she was no longer fully part of. Around them, the evening continued. Glasses lifted. Names were exchanged. Deals were hinted at in careful language. But beneath it all, something real had taken root. Not loud. Not obvious. Just there. Marcus glanced at the time, not with urgency, just awareness. He thought of his son, probably asleep by now, the small apartment dim, the quiet familiar and honest. He did not feel pulled away from the room, but he did not feel held by it either. He simply existed between both worlds, without needing to choose one over the other. Victoria followed his glance, not to the watch, but to the shift behind it. "You have somewhere else to be," she said, not as a question. Marcus nodded slightly. "I always do." The answer was calm, but it carried something deeper than schedule. It carried purpose. Victoria understood that in a way she had not expected. For years, her time had been divided into measured blocks, every hour accounted for, every decision aligned with something larger than herself. But standing there, she realized something she had not planned for. Not everything meaningful fit into a calendar. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice steady, but quieter than before. Not a formal thank you. Not one meant for public ears. Just hers. Marcus looked at her, not searching for anything in return. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied. The words met in the middle, equal, balanced, without transaction. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus stood, adjusting his jacket the same way he had when he arrived. No difference. No added weight. Just the same man, carrying the same presence. Victoria stepped slightly aside, giving him space, not because she had to, but because she chose to. As he walked toward the exit, fewer eyes followed him this time. Not because he was less noticeable, but because he had already been seen. The young server near the edge of the room watched him pass, her posture straightening just a little, her expression lighter than it had been earlier. Marcus gave her a small nod as he passed. Nothing more. Nothing needed. Outside, the air was cooler now, the city still moving, still loud, still unaware of what had shifted inside that building. Marcus stepped onto the sidewalk, hands settling into his coat pockets, his pace steady, unhurried. Behind him, the lights of the Gala continued to glow, but they no longer defined the night. Inside, Victoria remained where she was for a moment longer, looking toward the door he had just walked through. Not with regret, not with confusion, just with a quiet understanding she had not carried before. She turned back to the room, but not to control it, not to shape it, just to be in it, differently. And somewhere between the polished floors and the quiet conversations, something unspoken remained, not in the speeches, not in the plans, but in the way people now noticed each other just a little more. He did not raise his voice. He raised something else. And long after he left, the room remembered.